Testing mic. 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing mic. So I welcome you all for this very exciting journey in the world of Python programming. This may be the first programming language for many of you. Many of you may be having programming experience. You may have worked in other language like C, C++, Java, and many more. This is a language which you can take it up as your first programming language, and it is also, it has lot many things which it has to offer even to an experienced programmer, those who already have some programming experience. So this has something for everybody. This language was primarily designed for people who have ideas but do not want to have that big learning curve to learn a language. If you decide to learn language like Java, and if you decide to master that language Java, the learning itself takes a hell lot of time. Whereas Python is something that you can master very quickly. It is specifically designed for people who come from non-programming background. Maybe a mathematician, maybe a physician, somebody who has ideas, who has some kind of work to be done, but he is not aware of programming. They can also quickly grasp this language. And today in the field of AI, machine learning, this language is extensively being used. So even if you are developers who are well versed with C, C++, and you want to make a jump to this, is it like I'm still not audible? I'm getting message I'm not audible. Is it?
So we can hear
So
you.
you are audible.
I'm audible.
Audible.
Shreya has to figure out, maybe she has a problem. Let me message to Shreya. Check your audio settings. Shreya, check your audio settings. I'm audible to others. Here we go. So this language has a lot of things to offer to everybody. So we'll be learning this particular language, not just learning, we'll be mastering this language over a period of next 7 to 2 hours. And we'll make sure that whatever fundamental concepts that one has to be aware of to develop application using this particular language, those fundamental concepts will be covered in this particular course. This is a project-based Python programming language is what we're going to take up. Means what we'll be doing is in this course, as we learn some concepts and some topics in this language, we'll develop some small projects on those things. So you'll also find the use case as to how to use whatever we have learned. Now it could be from a simple weather app wherein you give a city name and the temperature in a city is being displayed. That could be a very simple app that we could be creating, or it could be a small game where you guess a number. So likewise, we'll be creating some projects. I'll be sharing the list of projects with you all very soon. And we'll not make a differentiation between people who come from programming background who are new. So we'll start right from scratch. There are very basic things that I'll be discussing. It could be a revision for those who come from programming background, and it could be a learning experience for those who are learning programming for the first time. So we'll go with a very simple pace wherein we'll take all our friends together. Before I begin with this journey, a quick introduction about myself. I'm Rishikesh, and I'll be conducting this particular program for you. I have 20 plus years of experience when it comes to programming. I have been actively involved into software development as well. My areas of interest have been system programming, application development, and databases. So I have been working extensively on those areas. I'm an adjunct professor in University of Pune. I have also been associated with Purdue University US for system programming course, and I'm with Impetus right from its inception. Teaching is my passion, and I've been learning and mastering all this language for a very long time now. I have been following Python right from its inception, the year when it was launched. From those days, I've been following Python as a language. And there is very interesting thing about Python as a language. There was time where we felt this language is dead. We felt we unnecessarily spent time learning this language. And believe me, that was a time when we felt, the first decade of this language, we felt, oh, we unnecessarily learned this language. And there are not many takers for this language. But then over a period after 2010, we have seen the resurgence in this particular language. We have seen this language becoming more and more popular in the last decade, last 10 years. And last session, we had an introductory session. Today, it's more of an introductory, but just I'll take it further. So you haven't missed much, even if you're attending the first this session for the first time. It is the beginning. We are not touched upon Python as a language. It was a general talk that we had last time. Before I go ahead with the today's session, some important things that you need to keep in mind. All questions are welcomed. There is no silly question. If there is any doubt in your mind, you have to go ahead, raising your hand. You can explore these tools which are there in Zoom, through which you can raise a hand. And if you cannot raise your hand, just unmute yourself and ask the question. And what is the right time to ask the question? Whenever the question comes to your mind. There is nothing as better time. I'll ask it after the session. Then what will happen during the session? Because you'll carry that doubt in your mind. And then whatever topic that I discussed after that doubt came in your mind, you'll not be in a position to comprehend those things. So the best time to ask the question is when you have a doubt in your mind. Ask and get it clarified. I'll make an attempt to clarify our doubts there and there itself. That's a common practice that we have. It's nothing like, oh, I'll answer it later. So as far as possible, if it's a related question, we'll discuss it, we'll clarify it there and there itself. If it is remotely related, if it's something not to do with the programming language immediately or topic that we're discussing immediately, then we can go offline and we can connect. That means after the session, we can correct. If it's something, somebody comes with the problem that he's facing in the office while he's using the language, now that's not something that will be useful for the, always useful for the class to understand the discussion that we are having, correct? So that can be taken offline. But then if it's related to the topic that we are discussing, we will discuss it there and there itself in the classroom itself. The language that we'll use during the discussion, the session is English, but then I am not a fan of English or something like that. We can switch over to Marathi, Hindi, whichever language you are comfortable with. I can understand English, Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati very well. So you can ask question in any of those languages. I don't have a problem. My answer to you will in English. In case if you find me speaking a bit fast, you will find enough of reactions over here where you can ask me to go slow. Or you can unmute yourself and ask me to repeat if you want to. Whatever topics that we discuss, this is just the beginning. Here there will be a bit of theory. But once we start with programming, whatever concept we discuss, we have an e-learning portal where every example that I discuss in the classroom, you'll find it uploaded on the site. You just have to download and you have to experiment with that particular code. It will be difficult for you to keep a pace with the notes that I'm taking. So when you see the slides, it's not important that you write everything that's there in the slide. But I told you last time, it is very important that for every session, you ought to have a notebook with you. You have to have a notebook. You have to take some important notes. Whatever you understand, you have to write at least the key point. You have to mention in your notebook. So anybody asks you, oh, 1st of December, what is that you discussed? You should at least have the highlights of the session. These are the things that we discussed on December the 1st. Our first day of the session, we understood this thing about Python. Take this thing in mind. Today, internet is going to provide you all the information in the world. Everything about Python you can find on internet, but what to search on internet, that's also a big question. So today, if I tell you, oh, go ahead and find some information of Python, what are you going to write? Okay, what are you going to search for? So today, if I talk about some aspects about Python, at least note down the key point. So when you note down the key point, you will know what all things we discussed. And if you want to explore more about it, you can go to the net and you can explore. And plus on an e-learning portal, you will have the complete information. Yes, Sagar.
Yeah. So sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to ask you, as we are recording the session, so you are going to share this recording with us for future reference?
I'll explain this. Recording is there. Recordings are available, but this is a live session. So what we encourage is, what we feel is like, if only recordings are to be heard, we already have recording for the previous batch. I can give the recording for the entire Python lectures, all the lectures that we have conducted earlier, but that will not have that kind of impact what you will have when you attend the live session. Because here you will have an opportunity to ask me a question, but there are times, say you are stuck in your office, for some reason there is some internet problem at your place, and then you could always ping us. You can send a message. I'll be sharing my email ID to you. In case if you have a genuine problem, send a message. You will get the recording for the last session. A link to that recording for the last session will be shared with you. So recordings are always available. Sometimes there was some topic, and some topics are like, there are a lot many things which are there and it's confusing. You want to revise it. Recordings will always be made available. But don't take at recording as something that I'll not attend the regular session. I'll listen to the recording. Take my word. How many times have you heard a video lecture for 1.5 hours on YouTube? It's difficult. This live session, the impact that you'll have when you commit, like every day, every alternate day we are going to meet. So you commit like 7 o'clock every alternate day, I'm going to come down for the session. So whatever learning that will happen, because now you are giving a dedicated time span for this particular session, the learning will be much more happening over here. Then if you feel, oh, at night I'll relax after dinner, I will listen to that video. Sir is anyway going to provide me, let me skip the session and that never comes. That never happens. The backlog will go on increasing to such an extent that you lose interest in Python. So as far as possible, commit yourself for the scheduled time. It is more like it's not an online session, it's more like a regular classroom session. The only thing is I'm not there in front of you in blood and flesh. I'm on this screen for you. That's the only difference. You can share your screen. I can give you permission in case you are stuck with some program. You can share your screen. I can take control of your screen, do the corrections. Everything that we could otherwise do in a classroom session, we are going to have it over here. So commit yourself for 7 o'clock every alternate day if you really want to master this language. Otherwise, videos, lecture series are always available. But keep that thing in mind. My personal experience says I have been interacting with the students so very often. When they ask me for videos, very rarely, if they miss 4-5 sessions, it's very difficult for them to cover up all those 4-5 sessions. It's difficult to listen to a video for 1.5 hours or 2 hours or kind of thing. But it's quite possible for you to be a part of the session where we all are interacting, we are discussing. There is a learning which is happening. Like Sagar asked a question, somebody else asked a question. We'll learn from others' questions as well. Recordings are there, but let it be an exception. Let it not become a norm. Every time recording, don't do that. Although you have permission to ask for any video, we will be giving you those videos, links to those videos, private videos. It will be available only through your email ID. You can access it, not directly. But let it be an exception. Commit for a class regularly. Is that okay, Sagar?
Yeah.
Okay. And
I just
genuine
wanted
time.
to clarify that too.
They are always available. They are always
Yeah.
available. They are always available.
Thank you so much.
Now, I just want you to have a look at our e-learning portal. So I'll just guide you through our e-learning portal. How do we begin? So this is our e-learning portal saying Impetus Learning Portal. And when you log in with your credentials, of course, your username, password, what will be shared with you over a period of time. So when you log in, what you'll get to see over here is the course that you are joined for. So whatever course that you are joined for, currently I'm conducting session for multiple courses. So here you'll find all these courses that I'm conducting today. That's not what should interest you. Your interest should be your course. So when you get into the course, suppose today we are discussing history of Python. So that notes are already available over here. Now currently your batch is not up. So you cannot see this data because this is only for ex-student and student from August batch. Yours is a December batch. So once I finish with this topic, you will also have permission to access this data. So even the theory part that I'm discussing will be available over here. Every program that we discuss in the class, the strings, the list function, look at that. Every function, every program that we'll be discussing will now be shared with you over here. Not just that, there'll be some assignments which will be there, which you can solve. There will be some assessments, some tests on various topics which will be there that you can really take up for to understand how much have you understood this particular topic and so on. And there are some additional reading, good reads, as we say, they will also be given. Some additional topics regarding Python, they will also be shared with you. So that's an e-learning portal that we have. That's our content delivery system that we have, through which all the contents of this particular session, of this particular course will be shared with you. So Let's begin with our discussion on Python as a programming language. I'm Rishikesh, and you can ask your question anytime. Okay, keep that thing in mind. The best time to ask a question is when the doubt comes to your mind, not to wait. And which language? Any language that I understand, Hindi, English, Marathi, Gujarati to an extent, you can ask your question anytime. So don't hesitate to ask a question. Just go ahead and ask a question and get your doubts clarified whenever anything comes to your mind. Okay. So we had a brief introduction last time. I'll just quickly run through it because many of you are joined for the first time. So we had introduction to Python where we understood what exactly is a programming language. I explained last time programming language is nothing but a set of instructions. It has its own grammar. It has its own, what do you say? It's not just about the grammar. It has its own set of words, commands. Like currently I'm speaking to in English. So English has some set of words. I am forming sentences using English as a language, correct? So grammar, English grammar, I used to form sentences. Likewise, Python will also have some commands. Those commands will be used in certain way. That's the grammar of that language. That's a syntax to form some meaningful instructions to get some work done. Okay. And there are so many languages which are there currently in the market. From A to Z, you have all those languages which are there. Every language will have its own application area. Some languages will be good for some part, some languages will be good for something else. Likewise, Python is a general purpose language. It can be used for a variety of tasks. It is not just a language through which you can write your regular programs that we know for addition of two numbers or something like that. You can do some web-based application development. You can do some scripting. You can do it for automation. You can use Python for a number of purposes. So it was invented long time back, 1990-91 by Gautam Rasam. It was more of a academic kind of project that it all started off with. It's a high level general purpose language used for solving problems of modern computer systems. And the best thing about Python is all the resources are freely available. Even the source code of the implementation of Python is freely available and it can run on any OS. So I am working on Windows right now. If somebody amongst you is working on Linux or Mac OS, don't worry. Our Python will still remain the same. You develop your application on your system and you can run it on any other system. How is it made possible is what I'm going to discuss today. And if you want to know more about Python, you want to download Python, you can visit the site python.org. So when you visit the site python.org, you'll find all the information that you need to work with Python. So you just have to go ahead to python.org. I'll say python, python.org. So when you visit this python.org, you'll find the documentation, the software. So you can go to the documentation and read the Python doc. You can download the current release of Python, that's 3.9. We'll also be working on 3.9. But if you do not have Windows 7 or Windows 10, then work with 3.1 and 3.2. Some of the commands will not work, but our course will really run. So you can download it. If you're working on different operating system, you could just have to go here and select which operating system you are working on, whether it's Linux, Mac, or whichever other operating system you have, download it. The entire documentation is also freely available. So you can go here and learn everything about Python, whatever topics that I take. You will also find some tutorials over here. There is a lot of information that is there. Look at the information that is there. Everything is there. You don't even have to purchase a textbook for this course. Okay. I'll make sure that everything that is required is shared with you on our e-learning portal. So what is Python? It's easy to learn. It's a programming language that blends procedural, functional, object paradigm. When I say procedural, language like C, Pascal, Fortran, procedural style, the technique of solving problems. Then when you talk about functional, maybe JavaScript, a new generation language, Scala, they are functional, or object-oriented like C++ and Java. Python is everything. Python will let you write the code in the old style, the new style, any style that you like to use, you can use it. It has several high-level data structures. If you want to write a code, writing the code from scratch takes a hell lot of time, too much of effort. And if you're working in Python, you have all the kind of data structures that you need already implemented. Say, assuming that you know about concept of matrices and everything. So if you want to perform those kind of mathematical operations, you don't have to start writing from scratch. Python will provide you support for those arithmetic operations as well. You are performing you are implementing some data structure like list or a map, Python will provide you everything ready-made. So it becomes very easy for you to develop an application. You just have to have an idea. Python will provide you support to implement those ideas. It will allow you to do object-oriented programming as well. And all the libraries are freely available. So there are standard libraries which are there, and there are a lot of additional libraries which are freely available, which can be downloaded and made a part of your application. So tomorrow you are working with data science, you require some additional support that doesn't come in built in Python. You can go to the Python repository, download a module for it, which will have support for those kind of operation. Tomorrow you want to do graphics in Python, you have a ready-made module that will help you perform. You want to develop games in Python, ready-made module. So in Python, you don't have to write anything from scratch. You have support for it. There are pre-written programs which are available that makes your journey in Python very, very exciting. If I was to write a program in Java or in C++ to implement list, if I'm going to write 1,000 lines of code to do that, in Python, I can finish in 1 or 2 lines. That's the kind of power Python has. Point is, these data structures already stand implemented in Python. There is a ready-made solution which is available for us in Python. There are various versions of Python which are currently there in the market. There is version 2 and version 3 family. Version 2.x and version 3.x, 3.1, 3.2, currently is 3.9. Our course will be for Python 3 and not for Python 2. Python 2 at the beginning of this year, 1st January 2020, the support for Python 2 has been discontinued. So we'll not be looking at any syntax of Python 2. The syntax of Python 2 is different and the syntax of Python 3 is different. So our course is about Python 3 or 3x, you can say 3.x, 3 point something something. So we'll be using 3.9, the latest version of Python. So if, or 3.7, that will also do. So if somebody asks you which Python are you working, we are working with Python 3.7 and 3.1 onwards, the syntax is consistent. So when I say 3.7, everything after 3.0 till 3.7 we'll be discussing when you learn Python. And some exciting news for you. When we talk about this Python or any language, there is this organization called as TIOBE. They keep a track of all the languages across the globe, the popularity index they maintain. And Python has ranked to be the second most popular language in the last month. Today is December, November 2020, it has displaced Java as the second most popular language. For last 20 years, it was C, C++, Java. Only 3 languages rule the market. That means first is either C or Java and third is C++. 6 months back, in October 19, one year back, it displaced C++ to be the third most popular language. And surprisingly this year, last month, it had displaced Java from the second spot. And this has happened in the first time in the 20 years. Last 20 years, the first 3 spots were always occupied by C or Java. First spot, either C or Java. Second spot, either C or Java. Third spot, C++ or something like that. Python was down somewhere. And it has displaced Java to be the second most popular language. Its lowest position since entire 2001, last 22 decades, is 13th, and highest position is 2. Who knows, it will displace C also to be the first most popular language. It has been found to be the language of the year in 2007, 2010, and 2018. So Python is very, very exciting. And as I told you, in the last decade, it has caught up very fast. If you look at a span of our last like almost 20, 25 years, if you look at this, look at the first 2 rows. It's the competition is between C and Java every time. Okay, since 2000, if you look at 2000 to 2020, so either C or Java is always first or second kind of place. Python, if you look in the year 2000, it was position 23. Can you see this? In the year 2000, Python was ranked 23, but 2005 became 7th position. 2010, it became 6th position. 2015, it became 6th position. 2020, it became 3rd position. And November, last month, it has displaced Java from the 2nd position. It has now become the 2nd most popular language. So why is it so? Why is it happening that Python has becoming so very popular? The biggest reason for Python becoming so very popular is its simplicity. It's very easy. Take my word. It's very easy. Python ought to be the first programming language. Anybody wants to learn programming, Python is the best choice to begin with. Not that who knows programming, he should not learn Python. There is much more that he can do. He will appreciate Python more. Say anybody amongst you who has already done some programming, you'll find Python much more interesting, because the kind of efforts that you put in Java or C++ or C will be reduced substantially. Here you can develop applications very, very quickly. Okay, you will have tremendous built-in support, which other languages will not provide you. Anybody amongst you who has worked with C? Rutuja has worked with C. If you look at the header files, in C, you will have 50, 60 header files, ready-made programs which are available. If you look at Java, there are 4,000 to 6,000 ready-made packages which are available. When I say packages, that means it's a group of related functions which are available, a ready-made implementation, 6,000 things which are already ready-made implemented and supplied to you, 6,000 ready-made features available in Java. When you talk about Python, there are more than 2 lakh. So there is no comparison. So any kind of task that you feel like doing, you will always find some ready-made solution in Python. It's just like we have to learn how to get that ready-made solution, integrate in our program, and how to use it. It's not about writing the code right from scratch. So that's the reason Python is becoming very, very exciting, very, very popular amongst all the developers, because you have your ideas. Today's machines are also very good. So Python is not as fast as C language or something like that. That's okay, because machines are very powerful today. So that speed can be compensated by good quality machines that we have nowadays. Today's generation machines are very powerful. So we can download that ready-made module and without much of effort, get our work done. And you can do everything that what you could do in other languages like C++, Java, whatever you could do all those things in Python as well. Learning Python is simple. Like, it's easy to learn. Syntax is very easy. It's not as strict as Java. Ye curly braces, wahan curly braces, yahan double quotes, wahan double quotes. It's not that complex. Okay, semicolon, everything. Nothing. Python is very simple. Somebody who understands English to read and write, he will understand half of the Python also when he looks at the instructions. So that's simple. It is print kind of method. So we understand it's printing. What else would you do? Input. It's reading. Those who are, some of you, Yash I see over here, who has done logic. Remember, Yash, we used to say display and accept. So likewise over here, you have print and input kind of thing. It's so very easy. So somebody who can understand English will find it very easy to learn. Rules are not that strict. It's quite flexible. Anybody amongst who has done object-oriented programming, designed classes and something, there are so many things you have to keep in mind. Oh, the structure, the behavior. Here you can attach, detach any point of time. So you'll understand why Python is so very exciting as we go ahead. It is just to give an idea as to what Python is all about. Now today we talk about features of Python. Okay, so that was a brief that we had discussed. Python is an interpreted language which can save considerable amount of time the program development, because no compilation or linking is necessary. Now this is something C++, C programmers, Java, C programmers, C++ programmer will understand. Even when you write a C code, you first need to compile it. Then we have to link it, although it happens automatically, but linking has to be done. And then you can run the program. In Python, it's not the case. You write your Python program and run it directly. There is something which will happen automatically. You don't have to do anything. You write a C code. It is you as a programmer, it is your responsibility to convert that particular code into a format that your machine understands. Don't worry with Python. If Python is installed in a machine, write the Python code and directly start running that particular code. So don't have to bother much about it. It will run directly on your machine, provided Python has been installed. What happens internally is what I'll discuss today, so that you have a very good understanding how Python program runs. That's what I'm going to discuss today. Okay. I see some students. Shruti is also there. Rutuja. People who have some programming background, they will appreciate Python more. And people who are learning programming for the first time, they will love it. Others will know, how much efforts did I put in Java and C++ to get the same work done? How many errors I used to get? And in Python, how the errors have come down. So it is a language which is very, very exciting. And like, I was going through the TOIB site, and they were telling about why Python has become popular. So one reason for Python becoming popular is simplicity. Anybody who wants to do any kind of coding today is selecting Python to be the first choice while learning. And if he has some simple requirements, they can be very easily fulfilled even by a novice. You don't have to be a software developer with an engineering degree to write programs. Okay, so Ambuj has done C++. So C++ is specifically meant for people who are from software programming background. So it's like an engineer or a BCA or a BCS guy who is going to learn C++. You will never have somebody who is not from programming background. He says, I want to learn C++. That's never going to happen, because these are meant for technical kind of thing. People who are software developers, it's only for them. Python is not only for software developers. Python is for everybody. That means even if you're not a software developer and you want to do a coding, Python is there for you. Python is a language that you can take up and you can start coding. So you don't really have to be a software developer. And there lies the reason for Python's popularity. Earlier, if you want to do any coding, I had to hire a software developer and ask him, Baba, coding karke de do, write the program for me. Today, if you have some idea in your mind, you may be a doctor, you may be a lawyer, you may be a mechanical engineer. Ambuj is a mechanical engineer. You be a mechanical engineer and you want to do some automation. You don't have to plead to a programmer, explain him what you want, and then he does the coding for you. No, you can do it on your own by using Python. So that's where Python has an edge over other languages. Anybody can learn Python. Anybody can learn any programming language, but learning Python is far more easier than learning any other language. The design, it is designed for people who do not come from programming background. The very idea initially was, let us have a language for non-programmers so that they have ideas. They want to bring the idea into reality. So why not have a language which is easy, where the syntax is not difficult? So the Python originated from that idea for people who do not come from programming background. And in today's world, my apologies for who are software engineers. Many of you are software engineers. But the fact is, today it is very difficult to find good software developers. Correct? So we cannot even rely on that software developer guy to develop a good software for us. Then what's the choice? You write it on your own. But you want to write it, you want to learn, you need to take an engineering degree, not required. Without having any formal education, that means any engineering degree or something, or a bachelor's degree in computer science, you can still develop application using Python. That's how simple Python is. It gives tremendous like power to everybody to write code, to automate the work. Today, when it comes to automation, Python is the most popular language in terms of automation. So it has something to offer to a mechanical guy. It has something to offer to anybody. Like you be from any background, Python has something for you. So if you are already a graduate from some other stream other than computer science, still today everybody needs to know programming. Even a doctor needs to know programming today, because half of the operations will be done today by robots. You would like to configure them, you would like to interact with them. So programming is required for everybody today. It's like आपण मध्यंतरी म्हणत होतो साक्षर पाहिजे, सही करता यायला पाहिजे, नंतर नाव लिहिता यायला पाहिजे. Then now later we said, okay, at least you should be in a position to read and write a bit. Today is like coding is like essential skill of today's generation. You need to know a bit of coding. It cannot be whatever stream you may take. So some of you are in school. I see Yash is even in his school. We don't know tomorrow he is going to become a doctor or engineer or a lawyer. We don't know what he's going to become. Correct? But programming is something which is a must. Because today's generation is all about technology, correct? And you are going to interact with the technology more and more as we go ahead. So you would like to have control over that technology as to how to customize the things. So this programming is not just about writing code. Programming is about problem solving. Can you solve the problems or not? So it will build your confidence. It's for everybody. Everybody needs to know programming today. Everybody needs to know programming. So here it's an interpreted language. Now, when I use the word interpreted language means you need not compile it. So somebody may asking, sir, what do you mean by compilation? When you write instructions, they are in English-like words and your machine doesn't understand English. So those instructions needs to be translated into a format that the machine will understand. And there is where the compilers comes into action. Compiler translate your program into a format which the machine understands. But Python is not a format language which is translated into format that the machine understands. It's not like Windows specific or Linux specific, not like that. It's something different. There is no compilation or linking which is necessary. Then somebody may argue. Those who know programming background, you may say, sir, क्या बात कर रहे हो? Compilation तो यहाँ भी होता है. अरे, but it's not like what you do in C++. In C++, you write a code, you first compile the code, and then you run the program. You compile, you link, and then you run the program. You do not have to do all those things in Python. These things happen automatically for you. There lies a big difference. Okay. and there's hardly any linking that will be done. So how it works, I'm going to explain you today, because Python doesn't, and if you're writing a program in C, C++, and if you change your machine, you write a C program on Windows, it cannot run on Linux. You have to again compile it. It cannot run on Mac. You again have to compile it. If your machine changes, machine means not like your machine and my machine, the architecture of the machine changes. Like somebody has a Linux machine, somebody has a Windows machine, somebody has a Solaris machine, operating systems are different. Somebody has a laptop, somebody has a desktop, somebody has a supercomputer, somebody has a mainframe. The machine is different. Somebody has a supercomputer, machine is different. So you need to recompile C, C++ program. No such thing has to be done in Python. You write Python code once and run it anywhere. You run it anywhere. Python allows you to split programs into modules that can be used into Python programs. So modularity, something very important. I told you about there are more than 2 lakh ready-made solutions which are available. Means there are ready-made modules which are available. Today, you wrote some program which can do some, say, linear algebra. It can help you provide support for linear algebra, some mathematical calculation. You can create a module, a ready-made solution, keep it in the repository, library, you can say. Those who don't under repository, keep it in the library, and you can take it from the library anytime, and you can use it in Python. But then you may say, sir, we have this feature in C++ also. We have header files. In Java also we have packages. But you have to design them separately. You need to create a header file separately. Have those include guard and everything. Have the extension is different, .h and something. Python means nothing. Your file can act. Please mute your video, audio. Okay. In Python, every program that you write becomes a module. You can keep that program, you can use it as an application, as a script, or you can use it as a ready-made module in some other application. So reusing something that you already done in Python is very easy. You don't have to take any extra efforts. So these modules can be created very easily when it comes to Python, and it supports something called as dynamic typing. Now, this is a very powerful feature called as dynamic typing. Now, suppose I want to store your age. Now, age is a number. I want to store your name. That's a string. I want to store your date of birth. That's a date. Correct? So the way I go ahead storing date, the variable that I'll be using will be different. Then I want to store your height, the variable that I'll be using different. The address, the type has to be different. In Python, you don't have to bother about it. You create a variable X, you can store a date into it, you can store time into it, you can store your age into it, your height into it, anything. The nature of the variable can change automatically as we go ahead. Yes, Sagar, what's the question?
So I have very basic question. Maybe you are going to explain that in the further lecture. So I just want to park my question here. So when we say Python is a platform independent language, okay. So I just want to understand that particular sentence. There must be some utility, some software which tells my Python program that this is a Linux machine, this is a Windows machine, or something must be there. So what is that when you say platform? Python is a platform independent.
Okay, that's a Python interpreter. Okay, and that particular software, did you see when I visited python.org, when I showed you download, what did you get to see over there?
No, I didn't notice.
You didn't notice? I visited a site. I just took you to a site. Here we went to this python.org, and on this python.org, I went to is the web page visible, everybody?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I showed you this full list of downloads, and then when we came over here, could you see this? Python for Linux, Python for Mac, Python for other OS. Can you see this? Python for Windows. Okay.
Yeah.
That means there is something that you will already be installing for all kind of machine. Can you see this? For AS400, for iOS, for OS 390, for Solaris, for HP UX, for Unix. There are so many Pythons which are available. Download for other platforms. For every platform, there is a Python which is available. So if I'm going to run your machine, on your machine, if I'm going to run a Python program, that means there has to be Python which is previously installed on your machine. Then only the program will run. So any machine on which Python has been installed, I'm not going into detail as of now. When I say Python has been installed, means what has been installed. So if I, as a developer, if you tell me that I have Python installed on my machine and you don't even give me any information about your machine architecture, you do not tell me anything about your operating system, then as a developer, I still don't have to bother. I'll write a script and I'll give that script to you, and I'm assured by the installation that has been done on your machine, mine is a Windows machine, and say yours is a Mac OS, correct? I write a code on Windows machine, give that script to you, it is assured to run on your machine because you have a Python for that operating system which is already installed on your machine. But I'll cut that thing open and explain you in detail as to how it really works. Because the second part of our discussion is we are going to talk about how Python program runs. So how is this machine independence provided to you? I'm going to come back to it as we go ahead in detail. I'll explain everything that is there. Rohit, are you asking a question or are you answering? Machine independent. That is an answer. It's machine independent, platform independent, machine independent. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Sagar, wait for the answer. Huh? I am going to give you answer in detail.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So Python enables programs to return compactly and readably. Readably because it's English-like. So commands are very simple for anyone to read. If I say input, as I said, if I say print, very easy. If I say evaluate, very easy. Okay. If I say list, I really understand what a list is. So it's very easy. Compactly. Now that's something very important. Compactly means for achieving some work, if I'm going to write 100 lines of C code, I can finish in 10 lines of Python code. So that kind of compactness Python will provide. So doing more with less lines of code. And this has an immediate impact. If you write less number of lines, so the time taken for development is less. The chances of you committing mistakes are also less. The time taken for testing is also less because the number of lines what you have written is less. So Python development happens very fast because you can write something very compactly. It will do more with less number of lines of code. Programs written in Python are typically much shorter than equivalent C, C++ or Java programs for several reasons. They have high level data types. Means if I have to create a list in C, I have to write 500 lines of code to create a list. And here that list is ready-made. I'll say list a grocery list. I got my list. So I don't have to write 200 lines of code, 500 lines of code to create a list. If I'm working in Python, one line, list is ready. So you have these ready-made data structures which are available. And they are like integers and characters, the way we define data types in other languages. Likewise, you can create a list or a map or a set over here directly. So that's straightforward it is. So it becomes very easy. Statement grouping is done by indentation instead of using braces. Remember those who come from C and C++, curly braces to begin. So there are a set of instructions, 5 instructions ka group hai. So you need to put a curly braces at the beginning, curly braces at the end, and the semicolon. All those decoration, all that ceremony is not there in Python. The way you write in your notes, while you take some notes, some sub points, you just indent it from the margin, you leave some space from the margin, and then you write that code. Suppose everything is over here, so you leave some margin and then you write some sub points. So the way you take notes while you create those indentation, likewise you indent your code in Python, it will understand what is a subgroup and everything. No variable declarations are necessary. In every programming language, if you have to store some data, you need to first create a variable and then use the variable. Python, the variable gets created when you use it. You don't have to declare it. Those who have done logic with me, remember we used to declare the variables first and then we used to use it. Here, nothing of that sort. You want to use a variable, just go ahead using it. The moment you store some value into a variable, the variable will automatically get created. You don't even have to specify the type. This variable is meant for storing integer or a character or a string or a date or a time. You don't have to specify anything. Python is dynamically typed. That means the same variable can store a different type of data at different time. If I have a variable X, in that I can store my address first, then I can store my height, then I can store my date of birth, then I can store the time when I was born. I can store anything. The type of the variable changes automatically. Dynamic typing, very important feature we'll be discussing. There are 4 types of languages, normally 4 or 5. There are some languages which are typeless. They do not understand difference between date or time or a number or a whole number or an integer. They don't understand difference. For them, data is data. They are typeless language, like BCPL. Then there are languages which are not a strongly typed language, like C, wherein you create a variable saying, oh, this variable is created for storing an integer, and this variable is created for storing a character. Correct? But if I store inside an integer character or inside a character integer, it doesn't generate error. It will convert that character to integer or integer to character. There is some loss of data that can happen. They are not a strongly typed language. Then comes language like Java. They are strongly typed language. If I create a variable to store integer, I can store only integers into it. I cannot store anything else. They are strongly typed language. Then comes language like dynamically typed language. I create a variable. The variable doesn't initially have any type. I store integer into it. The variable becomes of type integer. I store character into it. The variable becomes of type character. I store float in. I store date into it. The variable automatically becomes of type date. So nature of the variable keeps on changing automatically. Sagar, you still have a question?
No.
Then please put down your hand, because if I see a hand, it will like somebody has a question. Lower your hand, please.
Yeah.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, you said that variable declaration or argument declaration. Is it like the HTML or XML? Will like we have to run the codes and like that?
There is no comparison between HTML and Python. HTML is not even a full-fledged programming language. It's more of a scripting kind of thing. Python is a full-fledged programming language. In HTML, you do not, it's just a mechanism through which you will represent data. It will not do any processing. Python does processing. Okay, Python is a full-fledged programming language. HTML and other things are not programming languages. Is that okay? Is that okay, Shreya? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So no variable argument declarations are necessary, but there is a downside. Downside is like speed. Don't compare Python's performance with C and C++, because C and C++ are mapped to the machine architecture. If I'm using Windows machine, it will like I write a C code, I translate that C code into a format that my machine understands. So the C executable file is machine code. That means a format of instruction that my machine is going to understand. In Python, we don't have that machine code which comes in, not a format of code that your machine will understand. And that actually provides this platform independence. But then all the fully compiled language like C and C++, their code is directly mapped to the underlying hardware architecture. Now, those who are new for programming, don't worry about this point. But those who know programming, let me talk about it. Others just understand keep Python code is not translated into a format that my machine will understand, not translated into a format that my machine will understand. C++ programs are translated into a format that my machine will understand. And what happens is like, it will map to the underlying hardware. So what happens if I'm working on, I take a C program and I compile it on a machine. In your machine, if the word size is 2 bytes, your integer will be of size 2 bytes. If your word size is 4 bytes, integer will be of size 4 bytes. And accordingly, it will change the design as per the hardware. So the range and everything will change. The way the operations are being carried out, that will change as per the machine. That means representation of data, amount of memory that it takes, how the data is being stored, that will just keep on changing based on the machine architecture, best as per the machine. So whatever best features that machine provides, you're going to make the best use of their hardware machine architecture by using C++. But then it is strongly linked to your machine. That means if I compile a code for one kind of machine, I cannot take that code and run on another kind of machine. There lies a problem. That kind of problem doesn't occur when it comes to Python. But if you want some flexibility, it comes at a cost, and the cost is the speed. C++ program are specifically compiled for the host machine. So whichever machine you plan to run the program, your C++ programs are compiled for the host machine. So they work very, very fast on those machines. There is hardly any language that you can compare with C when it comes to speed. Now, Python will not work always as fast as C. I'm saying not always. That means sometimes it can. Not always as fast as C, because it is platform independent. It is like, it is the code that we run is never always converted into a format that the host machine will understand. That means your Windows or Linux machine understand. It is not even executed by your machine. That means your CPU will not directly take the responsibility of running a Python program. Whereas C++ program, they will be directly executed by your CPU. Listen what I'm saying to say. This is a bit weird when I say this, but that's how it is happening. Normally, your CPU will take the responsibility of executing every C instruction or every C++ instruction that you're running. Your CPU processor that is there in your machine. With Python, that's not the case. Your Python programs will not be directly executed by your processor, by your CPU that is installed in a machine. So the instruction need not be in a format that your CPU understands. There is somebody in between that will take responsibility of running a Python program. So Python programs are not compiled programs. They are not going to be executed on a machine and not executed by your, what do you say, by your processor, which is there inside your machine. Yes, Madhav, what's the question? Madhav, go ahead. Madhav, what's the question? Madhav, you have asked a question, but there is a confusion. So could you quickly explain what exactly you're saying? Unmute yourself and ask question, Madhav. Madhav Deshmukh. Look, questions are welcome, because what I'm saying may not always be 100% true. So if there is a doubt that comes to your mind, ask. Like Sagar asked a question, कि sir ये कैसे हो रहा है? I told him the discussion is coming for later, correct? So even if you have a question and if you have read something, you have learned something in academics, and you find me saying something which is contradictory to it, you should always ask. Okay, so don't hesitate to ask, because this is a very small group that we have, 50-60 people that we are. It's a small group, and while you're learning, while there's a trainer in front of you, he can always help you out in making this learning a very interesting or easy journey. Means your doubts will be clarified there and there itself. If you start learning on your own, not that you cannot learn Python, but who's there to clarify your doubts, correct? If there is something which is troubling you, go ahead and ask, because your question is not very clear. He says, sir, in Python compilers are not used for it compiled. So I did not understand the question. So you could just ask it. Why are you hesitating? And you should not hesitate to answer the question that I ask. It's your query. I'll ask you questions. You're not going to ask questions. You're going to ask queries. That means you have a doubt, you'll ask for the explanation. It's my duty to make sure that all your doubts are clarified, and your duty to answer every question that I ask you. Take it as an opportunity. That means when I ask a question, you should take it as an opportunity to answer it. Because what happens is that shows your involvement in the session. That means you are thinking about what we are learning. You are focused. You are listening to me. And if you go wrong, what worst can happen? You can go wrong. Okay. And best thing that can happen is you can go right. Your answer is right. Either of the case, you will never forget in your life. That day I had asked, I made an attempt to answer the question. I went wrong. And suddenly mala ulta palta ghetla. You'll remember it for your life. That topic you will not forget. These incidences that happen when you interact, when you ask some question. Sagar today asked a question. Remember, now there are so many of you, 50 people amongst you. और मुझे सागर का नाम ये क्यों याद रह रहा है? Because he asked a question. Correct? So when you ask a question, people will notice you. It's not just about being noticed. It is an opportunity that you have to check whether you have understood things correctly or not. It shows your involvement in the session. And with this involvement, learning happens. Learning doesn't happen just by regularly attending the session. That's one part of it. Learning happens with your involvement in the session. It's not like you put on the video and then you sit around watching that particular video that is there. Learning will not happen. Learning will happen with involvement. Ask questions, ask queries, doubts jo bhi rahenge, interact. Okay. Some statements that I have made may not be, you may feel abhi sahi nahi 100%. So raise your queries, doubt. I'll explain it if future me. Sometimes as a trainer, I cannot open up everything on day one. If I open up everything on day one, half of you will run away. If I tell you everything about Python on day one. So step by step, I'll एक layer निकालते जाएंगे ऊपर से, and we'll just keep on understanding with every opening of every layer how Python is beautiful. We'll understand. Yes, Shubham, what's your question? अथर्व, क्या query है?
Sir, the Python interpreter, does it convert the code that you write into assembly code and then into machine code?
It
So
seems
that's
you
the
come
reason
from C++
because it's-
background. आपने C++ किया है क्या?
Yes, sir.
हाँ,
Yes, sir.
तो आपने C++ किया हुआ है क्या?
हाँ sir.
हाँ, तो ये C++ के बंदे की सोच है. Look
C++.
at this. आपने जो क्वेश्चन पूछा है, इसी से समझ में आता है आपका बैकग्राउंड क्या है. ओके, पाइथन इज स्पेशल, इट डज समथिंग डिफरेंट. आई विल बी आंसरिंग दैट. शुभम, आपका क्या क्वेश्चन है? अथर्व, आपने जो कहा वो पाइथन नहीं करेगा. पाइथन विल डू समथिंग डिफरेंट. That's the learning that we'll have today. We have 20 more minutes, and in those 20 minutes I'll be explaining how Python is different than your C++. मंदार, क्या क्वेश्चन है? Go ahead, quick. We don't have time. We shouldn't waste time. If you have raised hand, you should answer. Otherwise, lower your hand. शुभम, देखो ऐसा नहीं करना, हाथ ऊपर करना और क्वेश्चन नहीं पूछना है, ये गलत है। या तो हाथ नीचे करो या फिर क्वेश्चन पूछो, आइदर ऑफ द केस। ओके, let's proceed further. So we talked about downside. So it will not work always as fast as C++. Huh? Always as fast as, it will not work always as fast as C++, because C++ code are mapped to the underlying hardware. आपका जो मशीन है उसके लिए वो कंपाइल किया जाता है. It is translated into a format that your machine can understand. So nothing can work as faster than C++. Okay, Mandar had a mic problem. That's okay. When it's resolved, ask a question. So how do you run a Python program? So if there is a Python statement and that you would like to execute, how do you go about executing a Python code? Okay, we have something called as an interactive shell. That makes Python all the more easy to learn. For a C programmer, even if he has to say good evening, listen to me. Agar wo C ka programmer hai, anybody amongst you who has done C programming? Raise your hand. Yeah, tick karo. Anybody amongst you who has done C programming? Okay, Rohit. Rohit has done C programming. And Rohit, there are many of them. Rohit, Atharva, Supriya, Prathamesh, Akash. Okay. Now, if I have to print good morning or good evening in C++, what will you do? Anybody? Tell me quickly, क्या करोगे C++ में good evening अगर कहना है तो?
We have to include header file and then write the
first आपने header file include किया, then
printf statement.
क्या बात कर रहे हो? Is it directly header file?
No, sir.
हाँ. फिर header file include किया, correct. फिर
console input output and then we print, go for printf or
नहीं होगा, नहीं होगा. लिखूं मैं, आप जो कह रहे हो लिखूं? Will it work?
मेन फंक्शन.
हाँ, you have to start with function main. एक header file include करना होगा, एक function main start करना होगा, उसका curly braces देना होगा. Then inside that you will call printf. ये directly होने वाला नहीं है. So there is so much of ceremony that you have to do. For those who are learning programming for the first time, just have a look at it. So just have a look at it. Suppose our friends who come from C++ background and they were going to write a C code. Just have a look at this. They were going to write a C code. And if they were writing a C program, this is what they will have to write to write a program. They will have to start with a new file. First, they'll have to create a file, isn't it? Yes or no? Will you have to create a file? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
You'll have to create a file and you'll have to give a name to that file. Say I call this file as hello.c. Suppose if I call this file and give a name to this file as hello.c, and then I'll have to save that file. I'll have to save that file. After I save that particular file, in that file, I have to write a statement, hash include, and then I'll say stdio.h, and then I'll say int main or something like that. In main, I'll say void. Look at the ceremony. Yeah? Don't worry, it's not a C course, so don't have to bother. But just look at the efforts that I'm putting in. And here I'll write a statement wherein I'll say printf, and look at the syntax. I'll say printf good evening. So much of efforts we have put in. There is so much of ceremony that has gone into it. Message print करना था good evening. उसके लिए header file, एक file बनाओ पहले. उसके अंदर int main, printf, return 0, ये कोड लिखा. स्टोरी यहाँ खत्म नहीं होगी. If you are a C++ programmer, उसका आगे भी आपको कुछ करना होगा. Then you will have to go to the command prompt या कहीं आप जो compiler है जहाँ आपका. And then you will have to compile this code, say in GCC या जो भी आपका compiler रहेगा. And then you will say hello.c -o hello. तो ऐसा कुछ तो करना होगा. इसके बाद आपको आगे भी कुछ करना है. So it is compiling this particular code. Once this code get compiled, then you will have to run this program by saying hello. And जब तब जाके hello good evening print कर रहा है. So much an effort that we put in. Correct? If you are a Python programmer and if I had asked you कि अब ये काम करना है आपको, तो if you are a Python programmer, अगर आपको ये काम करना था, तो you could have just said print good evening. हो गया काम, good evening आ गया. तो look at the difference in efforts that you put in. C में क्या क्या किया हमने? We wrote a file, created a file, saved that file, gave that file a name. हमने उस फाइल को कुछ तो नाम दे दिया. Okay, we gave a name to that particular file. Then we went to the command prompt. यहाँ गए, वहां जाके उस फाइल को कंपाइल कर लिया. कंपाइल करने के बाद रन कर लिया, तब जाके आउटपुट आ गया. अगर आप पाइथन में हो और गुड इवनिंग की जगह हाय देयर कहना है, तो कहिएगा प्रिंट welcome to, if I say welcome to impetus, आ गया welcome to impetus. क्या effort लिया आपने? Print कहा welcome to impetus. How easy it is. You don't have to create a separate file. You don't have to compile that particular file. You don't have to do that, include the header file. वो curly braces यहाँ देखा, ये क्या क्या याद रखना है? ये curly braces लिखना है. एक हाथ curly braces लिखना भूल गए तो ये compile भी नहीं होगा, ये error देगा. तो यहाँ अगर जाते हैं हम लोग, इसमें से अगर मैं बाहर आ जाता हूँ और अगर मैं इसे कंपाइल करने जाता, इट वुड हैव सेड एरर, वो जो कुछ तो बाकी है, यहाँ कर्ली ब्रेसेस लिखना आप भूल गए. अरे कितनी मेहनत है, हाउ मच एन एफर्ट्स दैट वी हैव टू पुट इन फॉर, क्या करना था, एक सिंपल सा मैसेज प्रिंट करना था, गुड इवनिंग. एंड विद पाइथन वी हैव दिस शेल एज वी कॉल दैट, दिस इज कॉल्ड एज पाइथन शेल. पाइथन लिखो, इट विल स्टार्ट डिपेंडिंग ऑन विच ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम. लिनक्स में पाइथन 3 वगैरह लिखना होगा. अगर आप समझो ये विंडोज में हूँ मैं, समझो मैं अगर लिनक्स में था, इफ यू आर वर्किंग अंडर लिनक्स and I want to start with Python, the latest version of Python. मैं Ubuntu start किया है अभी, तो here you will say Python 3, तो यहाँ ये start हो जाएगा. आजा बाबा, हो गया Python 3. It's version 3.6 in Ubuntu and in Windows I am using version 3.9, the latest version. तो दोनों वर्जन है मेरे पास. Linux में 3.6 है, Windows में 3.9 है and so on. तो अगर मुझे यहाँ कोई कोड लिखना है तो क्या लिखा, print welcome to Python. ये आ गया, print welcome to Python. कितना एफर्ट्स है, nothing at all. Now how did this code get executed? How did the outcome come? Output has been delivered. That is what we need to understand really. तो ये print कहने पे तो हो गया. अगर मुझे दो नंबर का एडिशन चाहिए था, think about a C++ प्रोग्राम, 2 नंबर का एडिशन का कोड अगर आपको लिखना है तो so much efforts you will have to take. You'll have to take 2 variables, add that value, then print it. यहाँ कुछ नहीं, 4 + 5 आ गया आंसर 9 डायरेक्टली. कोई भी अरिथमेटिक ऑपरेशन करना है, लाइक अ कैलकुलेटर, सो यूजिंग पाइथन लाइक अ कैलकुलेटर ओवर हियर. सो 56 डिवाइड बाय 7 आ गया आपका आंसर 8.0. अगर मैं एक इसके आइडियली में हूँ, देयर इज अ इनबिल्ट एडिटर दैट इज अवेलेबल कॉल्ड एज आइडियली. यहाँ तो आपको कलरफुल भी दिखाई देगा, सो इट बिकम्स ऑल द मोर इंटरेस्टिंग टू वर्क विद पाइथन. इट्स अ बेसिक एडिटर दैट कम्स बिल्ट इन अलॉन्ग विद पाइथन. जब भी हम लोग पाइथन इंस्टॉल करते हैं तो हमारे पास एक ऐसा आइडियली आता है. इसका एडवांटेज क्या है, ये थोड़ा सा कलरफुल प्रिंट करेगा, प्रिंट, एंड यहाँ हेल्प भी देगा the syntax कि क्या क्या कर सकते हैं आप. print good evening, isn't it? It's more colorful, not just colorful, it's also giving us a hint. ये good evening output आ गया blue color में, output है नहीं. 45 divided by 7 output in blue color kind of thing. So it becomes input output कहाँ क्या चल रहा है. If I'm defining a function def, if I define a function called as greet, wherein I'm going to pass a name, okay, don't worry, I'll be teaching you. And here I'm going to say print whatever name you pass. I'll say hello, comma name, comma how are you. Suppose, don't worry, you learn what I'm doing right now. Suppose that's a code that you have written. तो have you noticed one thing, ये def यहाँ start किया मैंने, यहाँ either 3 डॉट आ सकते थे या कुछ नहीं आएगा, ब्लैंक आएगा. तो ये कोड कंटिन्यू हुआ. कल जाके मुझे इस फंक्शन को कॉल करना है, those who have done function in C++, प्रोग्राम लिखना पड़ेगा. यहाँ कुछ नहीं. Here I say greet, and if I pass शुभम का नाम पास कर देता हूँ तो बोलेगा हेलो शुभम, हाउ आर यू. अगर मैंने शुभम की जगह अथर्व का नाम पास कर लिया, अथर्व, तो ये से हेलो अथर्व, हाउ आर यू. सो सिंपल इट बिकम्स व्हाइल यू स्टार्ट राइटिंग अ प्रोग्राम. ओके, तो ये आइडियली भी हमारे पास है, ये पाइथन शेल है. And this ready-made shell makes it very interesting, very easy for you to start writing a program. Have you noticed one thing? I did not compile the code. मैंने कोई compilation वगैरह किया नहीं, मैंने directly run करना शुरू किया, and that was done in this interactive environment called as a shell. तो हमारे पास एक Python shell था जिसमें हमने ये काम किया. We had worked with the Python shell.
काय करतोय? फाटा का तुला?
Turn off your mic, please. Here. So the easiest way to open Python shell is to launch ideally. So once you install Python and if you go on to the command prompt, देखिए आप यहाँ Windows के search bar में जाएंगे तो just have to type ideally. When you type ideally, press enter, it will start. Okay, that's how simple it is. And here, if you want to have some help about something, I can say okay help, and I want to have help about that function called as print. तो ये print function की help भी देगा आपको. So why do you need a documentation when everything is available over here directly? When everything is available. Oh, क्या देख रहे हैं आप लोग? Here. So if I want to have some help, see how did I go ahead? तो आई वेंट टू द कमांड प्रॉम्प्ट, मैंने यहाँ CMD गया, यहाँ जाके मैंने टाइप किया IDLE, ओके इट्स नॉट वर्किंग। ओके तो यहाँ सर्च में ही डायरेक्टली टाइप किया IDLE, and once I type it, this IDLE will start. And once I go to this IDLE, I forgot how to use that help print function कैसे use करना है, तो I say help print, it will give you entire information about that function called as print. So help is also there, everything is there. So आपको documentation अगर freely available है यहाँ, तो why do you need a textbook? Everything is available. If you forget something, just ask for help. It will give you the help. Everything is available. So learning Python becomes very, very interesting because almost everything that you need is very easily available. So that was an interactive shell that I gave an example of. This integrated programming development environment comes with Python installation. So once you install Python, उस Python installation के साथ साथ ही आपको ये IDLE मिल जाएगा. You will get this IDLE. This Windows shell contains an opening braces followed by this triple greater than. ये Python shell prompt था. हमने देखा नहीं क्या Python shell prompt. Have a look over here. Can you see this Python shell prompt triple greater than? It is over here. We'll type the command. जो भी आपको टाइप करना है कमांड, अगर मुझे किसी का नाम चाहिए था या कोई ऑपरेशन करना था, तो एनी 56 डिवाइडेड बाय 4.5 या 4.4.5 कोई ऑपरेशन करना है, आई विल गिव दैट कमांड ओवर हियर. ये पाइथन के प्रॉम्प्ट पे ये कमांड दूंगा, whatever is the command that I have to give. So that's the Python shell prompt. The cursor, the shell prompt waits for you to enter the Python command. So the cursor was blinking over there. मैंने Python का command वहाँ type कर लिया. And if you want to have help, you can just type help over there. I just give an example of help. मैंने दिखाया आपको how to do that. So if I wanted to have help, what I could do? I'm here. I could type help, and whatever things help I want. Suppose I want help of str. What is str? I want to know. It will give you help about whatever things you would like to. It says, okay, this is help about str, whatever it is. It has given us the entire help. 437 lines का help दिया इसने. It's a huge help that we have got. So that's how simple Python is. It makes learning Python very, very easy. Okay, and if you're finished with your work, you can just press Ctrl D, or you can type in exit. Once you type in exit, you will come out of Python. Want to see that? Suppose I was on the command prompt. मैं यहाँ था. Can you see the triple brackets where I can fire any Python command? 45 divided by 6, I get this answer. If I say exit, if I say exit with open bracket, close bracket, I come out of it. So that's how simple it is. Start typing. When you finish your work, just say exit. Or you could also press Ctrl D, or you could also press Ctrl Z, and you can stop Python. So you have Python shell where the program is running. So we saw this Python prompt. This Python prompt for these 3 angular brackets, and continuation के लिए at times you get 3 dots. You must type everything after the prompt, and the prompt you must type everything after the prompt when the prompt appears. जो भी आपको command type करना है वो 3 angular brackets के आगे आपको type करना है. The line should not begin with a prompt or output to the printer. So if you look at this last example that I taken when I was here, when you see these 3 angular brackets, that's where I'm typing the command. So let's start with Python once again. Suppose if I start with Python, ये जो 3 angular brackets है, there where the program we need to write our instruction. So when I say print, and if I say hello, don't worry about the spelling. If I say hello, and I say semicolon, जहाँ 3 brackets नहीं है, that's the output. 3 angular brackets नहीं है, that's the output. This is the output, and this was your instruction. So that's how simple it is. Okay. Now, the next question is, how does Python program run? And that is actually going to answer our question that we had, where Shubham had asked, how does Python program run? How is it like it Windows पे भी run करेगा, Linux पे भी run करेगा? How will it run on any machine? How is it will run on any machine? How does it become platform independent? That's the actual topic that we need to understand. So let me give you a brief and more detailed discussion about it is what I'll have next time. Next time I'll go into more details as to how the Python program runs, but still we have 10 minutes and let's use those 10 minutes. We'll stop at 8:30, 7 to 8:30 is our schedule. So in 10 minutes, I'll give a brief as to how Python program runs. Brief, that's not the complete discussion. So what happens? Whether we run Python code as a script or interactive in the shell, I showed you how to run interactively in the shell. मैंने वहाँ जाके I typed something, print and something like that. The Python interpreter does a great deal of work to carry out instructions in your program. So there was something called as a Python interpreter, which was doing the major work over here. So what is an interpreter? Those who come from programming background, You may be aware, compiler translates the code into the machine understand format. If you have 10 lines code, it will translate all the 10 lines code. Interpreter does it line by line. That's a basic definition. Here the story is slightly different, but let's understand what happens. So one point is, there is something called as a Python interpreter that is doing all the work. There is something called as a Python interpreter that is doing all the work for you. Next session, I'll go into details and explain what this Python interpreter is. But today there is something called as a Python interpreter. So while I'm writing the Python commands are executed by this Python interpreter for you. Now one term, Python interpreter. Okay, so how it really happens? Python reader, the interpreter reads Python expressions or statements. So if I write a code which has 10 lines, correct? So if I write a code which has 10 lines, that's my source code, what I have typed. What you type or what I type is a source code wherein we have written instruction in Python language, correct? So the Python interpreter first checks, kya iska grammar sahi hai kya? Whether the instructions are well formed, whether syntax is correct, whether you have used there is no spelling mistake, whether the commands are used properly or not, there are no errors. If it finds there are some error can be in the syntax, that is a grammar. Error can be in the command, there is no such command. The word is not there in the language, it will stop there in there itself with an error. So it's not going to do the translation. So interpreter is also going to do some kind of translation. Okay, so let's understand. Your compiler translates in C++, compiler translates your C code or a C++ program into machine code, a format of instruction that your Windows or Linux machine understand. Python interpreter, if it doesn't come across any message, it is going to do the translation. If it come across a message, it's going to stop. But it's not going to translate the code into a format that your Windows or Linux machine understand. No, it will not translate the code into machine code. It will translate the code into something called as a bytecode. Now Java programmers may be happy, hey, I know what is a bytecode. But hold on, this is a slightly different story. If your instructions are correct, the Python interpreter will translate that instruction into a low-level language. It's an intermediate language called as a bytecode. What is a bytecode? If zeros and ones were the format of instruction that your machine can understand, bytecode is a machine code for somebody else, not for a Windows machine, not for a Linux machine. It is a format of instruction that, like in Java, we had Java virtual machine. In Python, we have PVM, Python virtual machine. So your Python programs are not running on Windows or Linux machine. They are actually running on an intermediate layer, something in between, and that's your Python virtual machine. So while you write a Python instruction, the Python interpreter comes into action. I'm giving you a brief idea. Actually, the interpreter will do something more. Next session, we'll dissect that interpreter and understand more about the interpreter. But to keep it simple, your C++ program run on your host machine. So when I say host machine, your hardware, your CPU and everything. Python program does not, the instructions in Python are not executed by your CPU that is installed in your machine. So who's going to execute? There is another machine called as Python virtual machine. So when I say Python is installed in your machine, means what? That virtual machine is installed on your machine. So if that virtual machine is installed in your machine, PVM, I'll call that machine as PVM, Python virtual machine. So Python interpreter will translate the code into a format called as bytecode. Bytecode is not the format of instruction that your or my machine will understand, Windows or Linux machine will understand. It is a format of instruction that PVM will understand, Python virtual machine will understand. And once it is translated into Python virtual machine, a format of bytecode which Python virtual machine understand, the PVM will execute this instruction. When the interpreter runs the script, it is completely translates it into a bytecode. So PVM translates the instruction that you're writing into something called as bytecode, and those bytecodes are something that are executed. It is not the zeros and one. Every time we run something on the machine, हमारे दिमाग में एक ही idea है. Anything that has to be executed in the machine, machine understand only binary, zeros and ones, or zero and one convert करने के बाद ही it will run on the machine. Forget. It's an old story. We have a virtual machine which is running on top of your machine. And the instruction that it understands is not zeros and ones. There is a special kind of code called as bytecode it will understand. I'll show you those bytecodes. So the interpreter will translate the Python code into bytecodes, and these bytecodes will be sent to the PVM, and the Python virtual machine is the one that will execute this bytecode. So how does it work? You have a Python code. what I showed you. That Python code went through something called as syntax checker and translator. If there are errors, the translation will stop. It will generate an error. If there are no errors, it will convert into bytecode, and those bytecodes will be sent to something called as PVM. And in your program, if you are accepting some input, that will come to your PVM. If there are errors, it will stop. If there are no errors, the program will continue to run. So idea is, note here, I'm not talking your computer or my computer. I'm not talking the machine, the processor of my machine or your machine. Your Python code is translated into bytecode. Those bytecodes are not sent to your operating system or my machine or Windows machine or Linux machine. They are sent to PVM, and it's the PVM which is completing the task of running the Python program. So the story is slightly different. It's a lot easier and more secure and more portable across operating systems than writing program directly on top of your OS. C, C++ program are like applications which are running directly on top of your OS. Python programs are applications which are not running on top of your OS, Windows machine or Linux machine. They're working on interpreter. There is this Python interpreter. So as long as somebody provides me an assurance that there is a Python interpreter which is there on your operating system, I don't have to bother. I'll write Python programs. The interpreter will translate it into a format that the virtual machine will understand, and the program will run. So if there is somebody who tells me, so there is a Python code and that Python code has to run on his machine. So I'll only ask him one question: have you installed Python on your machine? If he says yes, I'll not even ask him whether your machine is Linux machine or Windows machine or Solaris machine. I'll write the Python code and give it to him. That means there is a PVM that is there on his machine, and my Python code is not going to run on the host Windows or Linux machine. It's going to run on top of that PVM. That was a brief idea about how Python program runs. Some of you may have thought it quite detailed. Hey? This is just a superficially we have touched upon it. We have to go into more details and understand next session what exactly is happening. And don't worry, even if it's a first programming language, some terms you will find it difficult to understand initially. अरे क्या complex बात कर रहे हैं? Python simple है कह रहे हैं. Python language simple है. Here we are trying to understand how it is working. So I'm going to give you some idea about internals of Python. वो Python developer के लिए समझना अच्छी बात है, compulsion नहीं है. It's not a compulsion that if you don't understand how Python program runs, you cannot write a Python program. Without even attending the session, you will still be in a position to attend the Python course. But with this understanding, you will have clear in your mind as to what is happening internally when the Python program is running. Okay. Now, if there are any questions, please ask. Somebody who is it's Suraj who's asking, is case sensitive language? We'll see that. That's more part of the syntax. Okay. Don't have to worry about the case, but is it case sensitive? In what context? Whether we are talking about the commands that we write, or whether we are talking about the whether we are talking about what do you say, the statements that we write. Okay, if you talk about the commands that we write, okay, every command that we write, those commands are case sensitive. Commands have to be written in small case. So I was using the print command. If you had seen, I always wrote in small case. I never wrote that print command in uppercase. So in that sense, Python is case sensitive. Okay, any other question? Mandar has a question. You are saying hardwares are designed for C, C++, Java. No. Java compilers are designed for various hardware. So for every hardware, you'll have a different C compiler. Are there any hardware available which directly supports Python, or possibly of making one? So keep in mind, hardware is not designed for the language. The language is designed for the hardware. Okay, so that should clarify your doubt. Mandar, is that okay? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Any other question, anybody? Shubhashri says, need more details of PVM. Yeah, we are going to discuss it. I'm going to trouble you. So next session, you just have to be patient. Na? आपको समझ में आया तो अच्छी बात है, नहीं आया तो भी अच्छी बात है. At least something you'll understand. You attend the entire session, few things you'll understand. I'll go into quite a detail to explain you what is happening internally. ये bytecodes क्या है, PVM क्या है, उसके internal story क्या है. I'll be discussing those things. So don't worry about it. In the course also, I'll be taking it up, how Python program runs. That's one topic that we take up during packaging and distribution of an application. So I'll be discussing in it. सिर्फ construct नहीं करेंगे PVM, उतने level तक discuss करेंगे. So don't worry. Any other question, anybody? तो रोहित का क्वेश्चन है कि आप बोले कि कोड कंपाइल नहीं करते हैं, तो वो बाइट कोड कौन से फाइल में स्टोर करता है? ओके, वो बाइट कोड टेम्परली क्रिएट भी करता है, किसी फाइल में स्टोर भी करता है, और उस फाइल को डिस्ट्रॉय भी कर देता है, बिकॉज बाद में आपको उसकी फाइल की जरूरत नहीं है। ओके, मगर अगर आप कोई प्रोग्राम स्क्रिप्ट बड़ी सी लिखोगे, इट विल स्टोर इनटू अ फाइल एंड दैट फाइल विल हैव एन एक्सटेंशन, इट इज देयर इन योर मशीन। अगर आपने पाइथन आपकी मशीन में इंस्टॉल किया है, यू विल ऑलवेज फाइंड वन मैजिक फोल्डर इंस्टॉल इन योर मशीन। एक ऑटोमेटिकली फोल्डर क्रिएट होता है, इसका नाम होता है डंडर पाई कैशे डंडर। एक ऐसा एक मैजिक फोल्डर आता है, यू कैन जस्ट चेक इट ऑन योर मशीन। पाई कैशे नाम का एक फोल्डर आता है, PYCHECHE, ऐसा एक फोल्डर आता है। एवरी प्रोग्राम यू रन, उसका एक कंपाइल कोड वहां आ जाता है विद एक्सटेंशन कॉल्ड एज PYC। हम लिखेंगे PY पाइथन कोड, वहां एक एडिशनल फाइल आता है, कंपाइल्ड फाइल PYC, एक ऐसे फाइल में क्रिएट होता है। बट व्हेन आई वाज राइटिंग दैट कोड, was it stored in the file? No, because later we are not going to reuse. So it was stored in a file, and that file was automatically destroyed. So it's an intermediate file. That bytecode gets stored in a file, it executes that file and destroys that file because you don't need it later. So it's going to destroy. You want to run Python programs faster? Then store that file, because next time you don't have to interpret them. You don't have to compile it. Means you can directly run that bytecode. So you can take a bytecode and run it directly. That can be done. So what if you want to recall? I didn't get the question, JM. What do you mean by recall? Yes, JM, what do you mean by recall? Recall means
Hello.
if I, please go ahead.
If we want to again get the answer or again the program, how we can recall the
How can reuse?
reuse?
Store that file. I'll show you how to store that file. So store that compile code so we can just reuse quickly.
But you said it will destroy after the
It does it on its own, destroys. But you tell them, I need it, I want it. So if you specify, you can save it and you can use it again. Okay. Any other question? Abhishek says, is the program executed line by line or the whole program at a time? Always line by line. Interpreter hai na? Interpreter interprets. It's like edit, compile, run cycle. It will read one line. Kiska line? Not the code that you and me write. That's like the big confusion. People say interpreter maate ek line ko compile karega. No, the code is already compiled into byte codes. It will read one byte code and execute it. Then next byte code, then execute it. Interpreter will always do it line by line. But keep in mind, it's not executing the Python code. It's executing line by line the byte code. Okay, there is more to it. ये थोड़ा सा superficial है. Some things I have not disclosed as of now. The actual picture will come out later. Okay, so we already crossed the time limit. 8:30 we have to stop. So please give me a feedback. Let me know if I was fast. There was too much of English. अगर आपको हिंदी में चाहिए, if you are comfortable with Marathi, I am comfortable with every language. Pisa Deshmukh, so no problem with Marathi. हिंदी स्कूल डेज से पढ़ते आ रहे हैं, ओके, हिंदी का भी कोई दिक्कत नहीं. So I don't have a problem. You tell me if you find somewhere anything. Let me ask you some question. Just tick on yes or no. Was the pace okay? Click on yes or no. The pace with which you conducted the session. यहाँ एक फीडबैक के लिए yes और no के दो बटन है. Okay. You have to explore the Zoom interface. तो सेशन के बाद भी लॉग इन कर सकते हैं, Zoom इंटरफेस से देख सकते हैं, बटन्स वगैरह है, यहाँ रिएक्शंस है बहुत सारे. टी ब्रेक लेना है तो टी ब्रेक है, ऐसा. देयर आर लॉट ऑफ रिएक्शंस दैट आर देयर. तो यू शुड रिएक्ट टू दोस थिंग्स. गिव मी अ फीडबैक कि कैसा है क्या नहीं. ओके, नाउ टेल मी, डिड यू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट वी डिस्कस टुडे? यस और नो कुछ तो फीडबैक दीजिएगा. चैट में मत टाइप कीजिएगा, यहाँ फीडबैक दीजिएगा. यस और नो बटन प्रेस करके फीडबैक दीजिएगा. Okay, Rutuja, Prathamesh, they liked the session. Thank you both. Okay, सबसे चाहिए फीडबैक. ओके, इंटरेक्शन चाहिए. ये ना हो कि आप वीडियो स्टार्ट करें और गायब हो गए हैं. That should not happen. So make sure that you invite your friends also for the next session. We meet day after tomorrow. and we'll continue the detailed discussion. Those who are learning Python for the Python as a first programming language, don't get scared after the next session. It is just like कुछ तो समझ में आएगा. It is nothing to do with the Python programming course as such. Means it will always help you just to have a idea clear कि ये magic नहीं है. There is no magic happening. What is happening internally, I'm just going to show you some more details. ये bytecode क्या है, ये कौन run करता है. ये आजकल तो today I used only one term called as Python interpreter, but there is no one thing as Python interpreter. There is something more. So that is what I'll discuss next time when we meet day after tomorrow. So do, if you like the session, do pass on this information to your friends. Invite your friends also for the session, and take my word, I'll make sure that you're very, very comfortable with this particular language at the end of this particular course. So that's all for today. Thank you all for attending the session. See you day after tomorrow. I'm available for the next 5-10 minutes. Even after this, if somebody wants to have some kind of questions, I'm available. Otherwise, the session is done for the day. Thank you all for attending the session. Good night. Love you all. Take care. Bye-bye.